Hey everyone, about over a year ago now, many of you may remember that I made a video about Tales of Vesperia. It was 2008 secret masterpiece, and honestly, I thought that video was pretty terrible. It just really wasn't well done. Few terrible jokes. Obviously, the mic quality in it was pretty horrible because I didn't have the good mic that I have now, and I feel like I just did a total disservice to my favorite video game of all time, and that's just not something I feel happy with. And so I feel like I just really need to redo that entire video, but this time how it really should be done, properly of course. Just keep in mind that I'm pretty bad about talking about things when I already know about everything that's in it, so like, spoilers probably will end up happening, so if you're remotely interested in playing this game, I apologize for anything that might be spoiled, whether it's just because of footage in the background, or whatever other reason that may cause it. The point is, this is the magic of Tales of Vesperia, my favorite game of all time. The Tales series of games is almost like the Devil May Cry of the action RPG. The game can be very difficult, but if you're very capable of being able to do what the game offers to you tool-wise, then you'll be super successful. But if you're not, it can be very difficult for you. Though the difference between Devil May Cry and the Tales series of games is that the Tales series of games you have to acquire a lot of the skills that you want through weapons. And that's the most important difference. You're actually going to have to earn some of the skills. So when you play in the early game, it can be very difficult to get some of the skills required. And it's definitely very important for you to resource and manage around 2 or 3 combos. Let's say, for instance, Yori, who I think is the character that we should focus the most on this section because he's the main character of the story and he's the most played character in the game. A lot of people don't even know you can play other characters, fun fact. There's a lot of very weird things in this game. But regardless, the point is that there's a lot of skills that you have to learn throughout the game. I will be showing a couple of example combos that characters can do in the background while I'm speaking over this footage. The first one that you're probably already looking at would be of Yuri. A lot of the things that allows him to be so capable is the combo plus skills, the super chain skills, and the high ability plus skills. These are all very important to Yuri's combo game, and what makes the combo so unique once you actually do have all these skills, you can bring them over into New Game Plus, and because of the amount of stuff that you might have to do for a lot of these characters and all the different difficulty scalings that they have, it kind of makes it feel like you're playing a fighting game that's also an RPG game. It starts off kind of basic. You're doing 3-hit combos into a couple of arts. You might do 3-hit combo Tiger Blade into like Shining Fang or something, and it's very, very simple, but the more skills that you get and the more that you're able to experiment with, and you get High Tension Plus to get you into overlimit based on hits or certain combos that are able to be fulfilled because you have certain arts that do a certain amount of hits that allow you to just keep going. The satisfaction of the game starts to build up, and it starts to open up, and there's a lot of really crazy things that you can do. So I admit, getting into this game at first, it can be very slow-paced and very difficult for a lot of people. For a lot of people who like a really in-depth game, it takes the time to get there. If I'm being honest, the first playthrough of this game, you love it because it's a good story. The second playthrough of the game, you love it because you grinded out the skills, and the combat system is super in-depth. You're not going to be focusing mostly on combos in your first playthrough. You will get some of the skills that you will need in order to improve those combos throughout the game, but the most important part is focusing on the story and having a few of the most important abilities. The game is overall really good, and I highly recommend it. And when it overall comes to bosses, you really have to focus on a lot of resource management and what bosses are actually going to do. There's a lot of learning that's involved, trust me. It's a pain in the ass, especially when you fight one in the certain endgame dungeon known as the Necropolis of Nostalgia. I won't spoil it, but there's a certain piece of shit at the end of it that can be a little frustrating, I have to admit. It's the amount of resource management that you get from fighting Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII, except you might as well multiply it by 20. If I have to put it for you bluntly, I think my first playthrough of that boss took me like 2 hours to beat it on the hardest difficulty, and that was without dying. That was like really good resource management. There's people who were probably able to do it faster than me, but that was my own personal casual experience after an understanding of how the boss worked. Regardless, I do think if you are a fan of fighting games, or if you're a fan of RPG games, or both, you'll definitely get a kick out of this one, whether it's just because you like anime in the casual sense, or it's because you really want to take the game on into the next playthrough, and learn a lot of those skills and build up all the characters. There's over 9 you can choose from, and you can do 4-player couch co-op if you really wanted to. If you own it on PC, you might be able to do it on Parsec too, something I gotta try myself. But let's just say, combat system super in-depth, and as you'll see from some of the background footage. Also, for any of you who have played the game, Judith is life, get mad, very fun character, fuck you. Let's go on to the next section. Had it not been for the combat, I would probably still be in love with this game, because in my opinion, the story and the characters are just that memorable. The story starts off rather basic. A boy named Yuri living in the lower quarter of the capital known as Zophius is trying to recover the Blastia core inside of the fountain, which is right now flooding the lower quarter. Blastia are technology that are basically used to power technology in everyday life. Imagine electricity in our everyday lives, and that's essentially what Blastia is for them. Essentially, Yuri gets caught up in a lot of business up in the upper quarter of the capital where all the royals live and gets sent to jail inside of the castle. An old man lets him out of his cell by giving him a prison key, and then he leaves the castle with the princess. How that happens is a bit of a weird situation. You'd have to play the game to help better understand. But it starts off rather simple. Just a man chasing after a Blastia core that he needs to help the people of his town. Well, let me tell you, by the end of the game, you're essentially saving the world. It's fucking wild, man. Guy casually leaves his hometown to be like, alright, well, I'm gonna go set off in this scary world full of monsters now to recover, like, technology that we need to live our everyday lives. Oh, what's that? Oh, fuck, dude, the world needs to be saved? I ought to just fucking drink some bleach right now. I mean, that's what I would do, but, you know, Yuri's an anime protagonist, so he's gonna fucking be successful at whatever he does, right? Well, play the game and find out yourself. The game has a wonderful cast of characters, which are all the ones that are playable. Yuri, Estelle, Rapide, the sidekick knighthood dog, Flynn, his best friend, who is also a captain of the Knights, Carol, a guild member of a monster hunting guild, Raven the Great, as we will call him, Rita, the famed young mage of the city of Ospio, Judith, who's Judith, and finally, Patty, the pirate. Basically, a child with a gun. You couldn't get more fucking amazing than that. For some reason, after I said that, I had like this really weird thought of like a child actually walking around with a gun, just like casually. Children just are allowed to have like pistols on them. And you know, now it sounds a lot scarier than like amazing. Regardless, there's not too much I can really say about the characters in this game without spoiling too much, so unless you want to sit here and listen to me give you like a character synopsis in much in-depth detail, which honestly just sounds extremely boring, I don't think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So instead, we're just going to move on to part 3. So now that we're on to part 3, I feel like it's best if I talk about some of my personal favorite things and some of my least personal favorite things. So starting with some of my personal things would definitely be the character Judith. Not necessarily because of her character development, but her combo game is insane. She's probably gotten the most gameplay in the background of this entire video, and thanks to the people who have made that background footage, by the way, because I'm not that good at Judith. I think I'm pretty decent with her, but some of the combos that she has are pretty hard to do and require some precise button inputs. But if you're a big fan of manually canceling and other moves, just constantly, infinitely canceling like it's a motherfucking no-you, this might be the character for you. The character that can just do absolutely whatever the hell that she wants. The only downside is that you really have to pay attention to her life bar, because she can die fairly easily. Definitely the weakest in the cast, besides for Rita. One of my least favorite parts about the game is the early game, specifically a new game. I don't mind the early game necessarily, but new game, it's because you don't really have access to all the tools that you get later in the game that really makes me dislike it. Combat in the early game, if you don't know a thing or two about manually canceling and spell canceling, can be a bit clunky and not feel the greatest. It can still be satisfying to hit people, but you're not going to be doing very much. My guide to getting into this game definitely starts with learn what manual canceling and spell canceling are, because that'll make you feels so much better. Another thing that I quite like about this game is that I really like a lot of the towns. A lot of the towns are very nice looking, very pretty, but a thing that I also really dislike about the towns is compared to a game, for instance, like Tales of Symphonia, a lot of the towns can be particularly pretty small. Where in a town, for instance, like the beginning area in Tales of Symphonia, there's a lot to explore, and you even move the camera a bit and go to different areas of the town. A lot of the areas in Tales of Vesperia, for instance, are a lot more basic, and you might only have one or two main areas of the town. Zophius is really the only major town that I could think of in the game besides for, like, Dongrest. Another thing that I quite like about the game is how well done the actual anime cutscenes in the game are. Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of them are too short, and there's not enough of them in the game, which is another personal gripe that I also have, is that not enough anime cutscenes. For some reason, there's only like a couple CG cutscenes that exist in the game, and most of them are done in-game, which is fine, because I like what the game has to offer, but I have to admit, I really would have liked more anime cutscenes, especially because a lot of the characters in this game are not featured in the actual anime movie. Now, another thing that I really like about this game is the English voice acting.
Alright, on today's menu we have a rice omelet.
Wow, this looks great. You drew a face on it in ketchup. This is Repeat's face, isn't it?
Mine is Repeat facing to the left.
Mine's a golem?
The English voice acting is so incredibly well done, which is not very common, especially for back around that time. But I have to say, the people who developed the Tales series of games have a really good track record of doing pretty decent English voice acting. Now, I do have to say, specifically for Yuri, I don't know if this is only specific to Definitive Edition, or if this was also for specifically stuff in the DLC version of Tales of Vesperia on PS3, but some specific moves have a different English voice actor trying to sound like the original guy or something.
Wind. Divine Storm. Combo power. Shine. Light as a morning star. Try some of this. Heavenly Lightwing.
And it really just doesn't sound right, and it can be quite distracting. I also have to say, maybe it's just because that I listened to the English voice actors for all the characters too long, but I feel like the Japanese voices just don't fit nearly as well in this game, which is not something I say very often, which is, to me, a testament to how well done the voice acting in English actually is. And finally, one of my favorite parts about this game is the monster book and collecting monster information. I absolutely love collecting monster information. Though I have to say, one gripe that I do have with collecting monster information is that it can be quite tedious in a way, because when you enter a battle you have to use an item called Magic Lens in order to scan them. Well, sometimes you're like outnumbered by a group of enemies, and they're all a bunch of enemies that you've never fought before, so since there's like a 3-second cooldown or whatever on using another item, it can be quite frustrating to keep using multiple Magic Lenses first. But with all that being said, there's not really too many things I particularly dislike about this game. And I have to admit, when it comes to getting to the actual endgame and grinding out skills, it can be kinda slow. But I still kind of enjoy the experience, and well, you know, I'm a guy who loves watching YouTube, so it's not that hard for me to grind and watch YouTube if I need to grind skills on a new game or whatever. But, you know, with that being said, I think it's time I get to the final thoughts. So pretty much my final thoughts on Tales of Vesperia is that, for me, it's the definition of a perfect game. If you're a big fan of RPG games and you're a big fan of fighting games, you'll get a hell of a lot out of this game. If you love farming for skills, leveling up your characters, going through dungeons, you'll pretty much get everything that you could ever possibly want out of a game like this. And like I said, if you're a fighting game fan like me, there's so much stuff that you can do with a character, it's quite incredible. As you may have saw earlier in the video, all of the stuff that the characters can do, there's just so much of it. When you get all of the actual skills grinded out and a lot of the different arts, it definitely makes New Game Plus worth it. And it's like a whole new, unique experience when you get to it. It's quite incredible, really. Now, I will have to say that maybe for some people, this game hasn't exactly aged the greatest. I think this game has aged pretty well, definitely graphically wise, but I can also say, for the sake of maybe some combat in the early game, I could see why people might have a complaint about it. I can understand, because like I said, the early game feels a bit clunky. But overall, for me, this game is definitely a 10 out of 10. I could see for a lot of people why it might be an 8 or 9 or 7, whatever, I could get it. But for me, it's the definition of a perfect video game. It's basically like watching a really good anime, it's like playing a really good RPG game, and it's also, when it's late game and New Game Plus parts of the game, like playing a fighting game to an extent, especially when you do standalone and you're putting yourself up in a 1v1 scenario. So, that's pretty much all I have to say about Tales of Vesperia. I know it wasn't the longest thing ever, but I also don't want to waste all your time either. I really just have to appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I super appreciate it. And to my guys that are in my in that Twitch Discord that we're in, thanks for all the support that you guys do, especially. I promise to come back to stream soon. My phone's a little messed up. I will be doing that for any of you guys that are actually watching it. It's just now I have to do stuff specifically on my PC, and I'm just not on my PC as much, so I do apologize about that. I will get back to doing that. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, guys, and I'm out.